Hello and welcome to episode number 5 of the Natural Medic Adventures. I am your host, Craig the Natural Medic. Wow, guys, it's been quite a ride. We're at episode 5 already, the end of the first season. I wanted to do this podcast to kind of try things out, see how things went, and I'm really loving this format. And if you're just listening for the first time, just to give you a little background about me, I am a former park ranger, was with the park systems in Arkansas and Texas with the state for about 10 years, and then left that. Actually, let me back up. I started off in Boy Scouts and got interested in the outdoors through Boy Scouts, earned my Eagle Scout, and was able to just, develop a love for the outdoors during that time. And when I got out of high school, I went to Stephen F. Austin State University down in Nacogdoches, Texas, earned a degree in forest recreation management, and was able to work as a park ranger for the states of Arkansas and Texas for about 10 years. I was able to do that for a while, but anyway, moving on. Been working in EMS since 2013. I'm a paramedic, but I've retained my love for the outdoors, so that's why I decided to start this podcast. Anyway, in previous podcasts, we have talked about a lot of different things. We have talked about how to prepare yourself for getting into habits of hiking, how to, get your body ready, physically, trying to eat the right foods and use hiking as an excuse to get in better shape for one reason, and try to figure out how to do that the best. And then we kind of moved into talking about skills. Well, sorry, we didn't move into skills. We moved into gear and what kind of things you need. We kind of touched on in brief the 10 essentials, which are navigation, sun protection, insulation, illumination, first aid supplies, fire, a repair kit and or tools, nutrition, hydration, and emergency shelter. And the 10 Essentials basically is a system that's developed by a group of mountaineers in the Pacific Northwest back in the 1930s. It's been pretty much adopted by a lot of the different hiking organizations out there as kind of a mantra of what kind of things you need to pack on your trip, kind of as basic necessities, just in case emergency arises. And so we touched on that in the second episode and talked about gear to some extent and what kind of things to look for. And in the future, we're going to revisit some gear topics. In our third episode, we talked about the Leave No Trace principles. And in the fourth episode, we started talking about the 10 Essentials a little more in depth. And in that particular episode, the last episode we put out about a month ago, we talked about navigation, we talked about sun protection, we talked about insulation, illumination, and first aid. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes as well that actually I've developed on my YouTube channel, some videos that kind of explain some of those even more in depth with the visual side of things so that you can understand that even more in depth. But for this episode, what we'll be doing is we're going to talk about the remainder of the 10 Essentials a little more in depth. The ones we have left that we didn't cover in the last episode, because we ran a little bit long. I enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. This is what interests me. And I'm glad that you're here joining me. And so without further ado, let's get started talking about the rest of the 10 Essentials. The first one we're going to talk about a little more in depth is fire. And fire is one of those aspects or systems of the 10 essentials that is important for a number of reasons. All of them kind of interrelate to other skills, but fire probably interrelates to more of the skills than anything out there in particular. And the reason that is because fire can be utilized for a number of things besides just, hey, I can build a fire. I get a little bit of water there. Fire is something that we as humans have been kind of fascinated with since we've discovered that, back when we were of more primitive nature. And the ability to make fire is a very important skill. And pretty soon after this episode releases, I will have a video available on my YouTube channel, which will explain a little bit this more in visual detail. But for now, we're going to talk about fire and what importance it has, what to look for, and things like that. So, of course, fire, as I said, it's been a fascination of humans since the beginning of, human history. The beginning of us as humans on this planet. And, I'm not condoning arson or something like that. But in an emergency situation, you may have to build a fire. You may be out there with a group of you hiking, and your buddy or your friend or whoever, spouse, kid, whatever, gets injured out there, and, you have to stay out there longer than you intend. Well, you may need to start a fire. And fires are pretty simple overall to start. You need 3 basic types of wood to start a fire. First of all, you need tinder, you need kindling, secondly, and then fuel wood. And definitely want to, check on those regulations of the park or whatever natural area you might be going to when you are getting ready to head out to your location. You definitely don't want to, you want to use leave no trace principles, of course. And you don't want to, if there's a fire ban in the area or there's been, forest fires, you want to try to limit your use of fire no matter what. But, just depending on the situation. But you definitely want to be able to start a fire when you need to, because fires are useful for a number of things. Fires are useful for a source of heat. Fires are useful for emergency signaling. Fires can be used to purify water. Fires can be used to cook food. And fires just kind of, as I said, that human fascination, fires kind of provide that sense of, fascination, or it's just something about fire that always has fascinated us as humans. And so we want to think about what kind of ways can we create a fire if we needed to in an emergency situation. So what I carry a lot of times in my fire kit, and I'll go into this in visual detail when I post the YouTube video, which will be coming up pretty soon. What I do is I carry just a regular old Bic lighter. Got one sitting right here. You can hear it flick, just like that. What is so special about Bic lighters? Well, really, they're a very simple device. It's got a fuel canister in there with a striker, and then a little plastic for lack of a better term, plate that lets that fuel in. So it's just one little striking motion. You strike it, you got a fire. And Bic lighters are cheap. They're easy to obtain. You can stick one in your pocket. They usually, even if they've gotten wet, they will still light. So they're reliable. And, that's pretty much that. Now, in combination with that, what I usually do carry is, it sounds kind of simple, but I just clean out my dryer in my house and get the dryer lint out. And I get like a Ziploc bag of that. And I take some Vaseline or some chapstick, and I roll those little balls of lint up and make little fire starters, because when you put a little chapstick on there, chapstick or Vaseline is a petroleum product. So it is by nature flammable. And in addition to that, it keeps, it can light up, things that are wet. So it'll light in a wet environment. It'll light things that are wet. And it's a reliable fire starting tool. Other things you might consider in your fire starting kit might be your good old magnesium fire starter. We used some of those back in Boy Scout days. They're still out there. They're still usable. It's basically just a rectangle, probably about 3 inches by about a 1/2 inch thick at the most. Usually it's probably not quite that thick. And it has a little striker plate on the top of it. And basically you just scrape off that magnesium with your knife blade into a little pile. You place the striker part of the magnesium fire starter right there on top of that little pile of magnesium, and you make a spark. And it will instantly make a fire. And those things are cheap too. They're available. I think I picked up one at not Tractor Supply. Sorry, Harbor Freight a couple of months ago. And I haven't really had a chance to use it since, but I do have it in my pack just in case I need it. And I think it cost me like $2.50, so it's super cheap. But a good way to do that. And there's also what they call fire steel, which is basically I believe it's a magnesium rod. Looks kind of like a key in some aspects. And it has a little steel plate, and you just kind of hit that and it makes a spark. And you can use those as well. And those are pretty cheap as well. You can find those on Amazon. And I'll try to link some of those maybe in the show notes so you can see those. But any or all of those would be good to carry in your fire starting kit, because when that moment strikes, you need to start a fire, it's good to have that ability to make the fire. Okay, moving on to the next topic. We're going to talk about repair kit and tools. Now, repair kit and tools, and the 10 essentials, of course, do not, solely pertain to hiking and/or backpacking. They pertain to pretty much any outdoor activity that you go on. So you have to think about what type of gear you're carrying, what type of equipment you are using, and that will come into play with what kind of tools that you might want to carry, or what kind of repair equipment you might want to carry. If you have a tent with poles, your typical fiberglass or aluminum poles, and you're going to be camping out, it might be a good idea to carry some type of pole repair kit. They do make those out there. But kind of the end-all be-all that goes in my personal repair kit that kind of fits to everything, and it kind of varies. I usually carry a small Leatherman. So I don't carry one of those gigantic ones, but I have a small leather one, and I can't remember the exact model offhand. But the Leatherman tool is great. And all of mine that I used to have some Leatherman tools, or maybe it was a Gerber tool, that did not lock when the tools came out of the handle. And that was kind of not real safe. So all the ones I have now actually do have a locking ability, so whenever that tool comes out, they can lock and lock in place so that they don't come back on me. But your multi-tools, depending on which one you get, they're going to have the basic stuff. They're going to have a knife on there. They're going to have screwdrivers of different sizes, different types, can openers. They might have a pair of scissors or a little saw and things like that. The compact ones even are just as handy as the bigger, heavier ones. I usually carry one just in case, because you never know. And that's kind of an all-in-one. Of course, they also usually have pliers of some sort. Sometimes they have a bigger plier, and most of the time they seem to have a needle nose plier on them, which is a little more handy for a lot of the things that you're trying to do, in the outdoors. If you're trying to repair something, the needle nose pliers are probably a little more handy. Excuse me, get a little water, than the bigger type pliers. So So that's something to take into consideration. Some people like to carry just a regular knife, a regular old pocket knife, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. I carry a knife from time to time as well. Sometimes I carry my knife in my pocket, and I have the multi-tool in my pack, just in case I need something a little more, with more tools on it. Additionally, a lot of times I will carry a small roll of duct tape. Not like a full roll, but I just roll off, say, 3 or 4 yards of duct tape onto, something I can either roll it on itself or roll it onto a pencil or something like that. So I have that available to me, because with duct tape, pretty much you can fix just about anything. And a lot of times I'm also going to carry a small hank, 100 feet or so, or sometimes less, of paracord. I guess 100 feet is kind of excessive. So a lot of times I'll just have some of those survival bracelets. They usually, in a men's size, usually going to be about 8 inches in the wrist. And those are going to be able, when you unravel them, they're going to hold about 8 feet of paracord. That's probably plenty for most situations. You can carry more if you want to. It's not very heavy. It does get kind of bulky when the more you carry, but that's pretty much all you really need to carry. Let's see. Anything else? And that's pretty much it for repair kit. So you're not anticipating something to go wrong, but if your pack strap breaks, if you have a blowout in your shoe for some reason, your hiking boot or your trail runners or whatever you're wearing, that duct tape, can at least provide a temporary fix to, any of those problems. And some of your repair kit stuff can go into, can forgive the term, can bleed over into your first aid or other areas. You get a rip in your raincoat. You can put some duct tape on there for temporary to close that up. You can, use the paracord to mend, a hole in your pants or in your shorts. So, you have to be thinking about these things and have the ability to handle those things, because you may be way out there, way far away from anything else, and may not be able to, just run down to the dollar store or to Walmart or whatever to get, a repair need that you might have, that might arise during your trip. So that pretty much takes care of that one. As far as the next one, which is nutrition and food, that kind of goes back into your trip planning. We talked about trip planning in episode 2 to a small extent. In a future episode, we're going to talk about trip planning a little more in detail. And, as much as people plan on their trips for things to come out the way that they want to, that doesn't always happen. Things happen. That's just the nature of life. Again, you go back to your buddy getting hurt, or you get hurt, or, the portion of the trail when you're coming back is flooded and you can't get through, you're going to have to wait, or, whatever the situation might be. You happen to be out there longer than you anticipated. It's good to have extra food. The body runs on nutrients. When you eat food, the body converts that food into glucose, which runs your body's tissues. It runs your body's, functions. It makes your organs work, and so on and so forth. So it's important to have that extra body fuel in your pack, just in case you need extra go power for extra time you have to spend out there. You anticipated being on the trail for 4 hours and you end up being on the trail for 8, 10, 12, 14 hours, longer maybe. Maybe you're there overnight. It's good to have an extra day's food. And you want to have items in your pack that, as far as the 10 essentials are concerned, you want to have items that are easy to pack, don't have to be cooked, and have a high energy and nutritional value. So things like trail mix, nuts, granola bars, things of that nature are good to have in your pack. So if you normally would eat or bring with you, say, 4 granola bars, maybe you need to bring 8 granola bars. Maybe instead of bringing 1 bag of trail mix, maybe you need to bring 2 bags. Just think about this. Think about the worst case scenario and, put that into account. You hope that doesn't happen, but in case it does, you want to be prepared to handle that, just in case. So make sure you pack extra food. Now for the next one, we're going to talk about hydration. Hydration is, dare I say, more important, or slightly more important at least, than food. Your body can survive. I'm not saying your body will be very happy, but your body can survive with, limited amounts of food. Like I said, not going to be very happy, but it can survive with limited amounts of food. Up to, probably 3 or 4 weeks if you're really pushing it without eating. Like I said, wouldn't be happy, but he would be able to do it. However, your body cannot survive more than about 3 days at the most to not having water. The body relies on water for a multitude of daily functions. And if you get dehydrated out there, it's happened to me a couple of times this summer. I have gotten a little hot on a couple of these hikes that I've done this past summer. One in particular, I wasn't sure I was going to make it back to the vehicle. Did an 8-mile round trip hike over at Caddo Lake National Wildlife Refuge. They have an 8-mile trail that goes all the way around the entire refuge. And this was this was early June. And it wasn't really that hot yet, but it was very humid. And I started off the day, it was in the low 80s. And by the time I got off the trail, it was, with the heat index, it was close to 100. So, yeah. And I had water. I had a full bladder of water in my pack, hydration bladder. I'm not talking about my personal bladder, because I was sweating a lot. But I had a full bladder of water, and I pretty much just drained that whole bladder during my trip around the refuge and got pretty warm. So in a warmer environment, if you're in an environment like Texas, where, probably the eastern half is still pretty humid, so your heat index is going to be up there. Or even if you're in an environment like West Texas or, southern New Mexico, Arizona, Southern California, where it's kind of a desert, arid environment, in those situations, if you're out there, you're going to be using a lot of water. So the average adult male, needs about 90 some odd ounces just under normal conditions. The average female needs probably around between 70 to 80 ounces. Not sure the exact amounts on either one of those. But, and when you're in, a hot environment and you're also exercising through, if you're hiking, biking, running, whatever, you need to be drinking water before you feel thirsty. Because once you start to feel thirsty, that's when your dehydration is starting to set in. And that's when you kind of get in that bad way. As long as you're still sweating, you're all right. But you still can get heat exhaustion. Heat exhaustion comes when your body just is using so much water. You're still able to sweat, but your body overall is running hot. Kind of like that gauge on your car, you know, in the hot summertime, going through Death Valley, and your car is approaching that red zone. And heat stroke is when your body has stopped sweating and stopped cooling itself, and it can no longer cool itself, and you're in a bad situation. So before that happens, you need to make sure you take care of your water needs. So first off, bring plenty of water, and always try to prehydrate. If you're going to go on a long trip, regardless of the weather, you know, when you're exercising, your body's going to be running through a lot of water. So you need to prehydrate yourself. Use electrolyte type drinks if you can, and try to, you know, keep those electrolytes, you know, the best you can in balance. I did have I can't remember the name right offhand, but it's a little tablet that drops in. I tried it on my last hike, and I still got pretty hot. I don't think I got quite as hot as I did on some of my previous hikes, but it seemed to help. It's just a drop-in tablet, and it helped provide some electrolytes in the water. And when you're doing your trip planning, this also comes into effect. You want to be able to find out ways to obtain more water if you're out there. So in addition to carrying water, you want to be able to identify bodies of water that are either at your destination you're heading to or on your route to that destination that you can obtain water. And even though it looks like a clean stream to drink out of, you know, don't drink water no matter how clean it looks. Most of the water out there are a few exceptions in the world, but I would always treat water as it's dirty until proven otherwise. And when I say dirty, I mean it has organisms in there that can make you sick. So there's a couple different ways to purify the water. There's several different filters out there, and those are the subject of great debate. If you go on YouTube and you type in water filters, you're going to have any number of opinions on which one is the best. There seem to be some that are winners, that seem to be coming out on top, but there's a lot of different ones out there. I'll just kind of throw a few out there that I know of, that I have in my own possession. I've never actually used the Sawyer. The only one I've actually used I've used a Katadyn a couple of times. And I've boiled water, and I've also used purification tablets. So those are methods you can use as well. But I haven't used a Sawyer, and I have used a LifeStraw before. The LifeStraw basically is just a big, almost kind of like a big gigantic milkshake straw that you just dip in the water and you drink out of it. And it has filters in there that filter out impurities in the water, the baddies in there. Also filters out microplastics, and microplastics are a big issue with water. They can get into your body by ingesting them. And if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link in the show notes, so I don't have to go into that right now. But basically, they're just like they sound. They're very small particles of plastic from all the plastic that we use throughout different products in the world. And they've collected in our water supply to some extent. They're not in every bit of water out there, but they're in a lot of the water. So we need to be careful about that. So you've got options. You can use a filter to, once you have obtained, or once you have figured out that there is a spring, there is a lake, a creek, a pond, whatever, to obtain your water, you can use a LifeStraw, a Sawyer, Katadyn, any of these different filters out there to obtain water, or you can collect the water and boil it for 30 minutes to kill all of the harmful microorganisms inside of it. Or you could even use the water purification tablets, which usually involve a number of chemicals. Iodine is a common one, that you drop those in there and they set for a certain amount of time, and the chemicals in the water kill all of the microorganisms, so they are no longer harmful to you. The only thing I don't like about using the purification tablets is the taste of the water usually is not real great. But it's better than getting sick from Giardia or some other little baddie that wants to get in my intestine and make me sick. So anyway, goes without saying that water is very important. And for our last part of the 10 essentials today, we're going to talk about shelter. And shelter can be obtained in a number of different ways. You could carry with you a tent of some sort. Might be a little impractical on a day hike, but I could see somebody doing that. A space blanket, a tarp, or a bivy. Any of those would be options you could do. Probably the most versatile would be a space blanket and compact would be a space blanket or a tarp. Both of those could be configured in a configuration where it would protect you from the elements. That's the primary focus of shelter, is to provide a refuge from the elements. Again, if you're stuck out there for, severe weather condition, something happens to your buddy and you're waiting for, medical services to arrive, or the park rangers, or whoever you're waiting on, if you get out there and you need help and you can't get away from that situation, you need to have a way to protect yourself from the elements. And so, as I said, using one of the above methods is, essential. So carry with you a compact tent. There are tents they call a tube tent, which basically is just a long tube shaped, hence the name, emergency tent that just kind of stakes out like an old Boy Scout pup tent, like we used back in the Boy Scout days, and it protects you from the elements. They're pretty comparable to a trash bag with some ties on the end of it, but they're big enough that you could get in there with you and another person, or maybe even possibly a couple other people, to get shelter from an inclement weather event or a storm or whatever. A tarp probably would be my choice, or an emergency blanket, because those are very lightweight and compact. The emergency blankets are even better. They used to be just a Mylar type space blanket back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s. That's what I had in my gear for emergency situations. But now they have evolved into a kind of a into kind of a emergency blanket / tarp kind of hybrid that allows you to utilize, both aspects of the tarp, the waterproofness, the adaptability of a tarp, being able to set it up like a lean-to, or to use it to block, in a certain direction, the wind or the rain or the snow or whatever. But also the space blanket aspect of it usually has involved some kind of reflective material like Mylar or some other material that allows your body heat to be reflected back to you. And that's very lightweight. The space blanket I carry nowadays in my pack is from SOL, and it's a very compact space blanket. On one side, it kind of has that tarp-like surface. It's kind of a orangey red. And on the other side, it's a reflective surface that is more tarp-like. But it's good to have that just in case you need to make a shelter for those situations where you don't expect to be out there longer than you are. You go out for a day hike and you end up spending the night because, XYZ happens. So it's good to have that. So that pretty much summarizes, in the 2 episodes that we've covered the 10 essentials, a little more in depth about each one of those. So it's important to do that. I don't have this up yet, but I will have this up very soon. I'm going to have an email list that you can jump on totally for free. And I've developed a checklist that allows you to go through all these 10 essentials and look at items as suggestions of what you might pack. So it's a helpful list. So if you sign up for my email list, when I have that, I'll put a link in the show notes that signing up for the list will get you that checklist. And that will help you with some of your packing of your 10 essentials. I know I've been talking about my Etsy store since the beginning of this podcast, and I haven't gotten my digital items up, but I finally got a digital item up as of today when I'm recording this podcast. And it's actually a habit tracker. So it could be useful for a number of things. We talked about, remember in the first episode, about how to track your habits and create good habits, whether that be exercising to get yourself more in shape, or you're checking on things to get yourself more healthy by consuming better food, drinking more water, or whatever. It takes about 21 days to get a habit going in your life. There's 21 days of going over and over. So I created this calendar journal. It's called a mandala. It's kind of those flower-shaped circles. So it's a calendar that allows you to track your habits. And also there's associated journal pages that will allow you to get on there and write down your goals, write down what you want to do for XYZ month, whatever month it is, you can kind of put goals down. And that's always good to have. And if you'd like your own copy of that, you can go to my Etsy store. It's called Roadrunner Rarities. I'll put a link in the show notes. And you can get that for 50% off. And that will allow you to have a journal you can print out. You immediately get a download of it. You can print it out and you can use it to track your habits, either ones you're doing now or ones you want to develop. But I definitely appreciate you listening to me on my podcast. This is the end of season 1. This is episode number 5. I can't hardly believe it. I thank you so much for sticking with me. I appreciate you listening to me. I'm still going to be producing episodes. I'm just going to be moving into a different season coming up. As of right now, I'm just going to be putting out an episode on the 4th of every month. It's in some point in the future, I probably will put out episodes on a more often than just once a month. But right now, that's about as much as I can do. I've been doing some different experiments with my recording. I'm recording a little bit differently this time. I'm using my phone to record, and I'm going to upload it into a new editor that I just discovered called Descript. Then I'm going to upload it like I normally do to my host, which is Buzzsprout. And I love Buzzsprout, and I appreciate them being there and being so cool and allowing us to host our podcast on their site. Now, of course, I pay them for that, but I think it's the easiest place to use. If you're wanting to start a podcast, I definitely recommend using Buzzsprout as your host site. I'm using an Android phone to record on right now. It's the Dolby Plus app, I believe is the name of it. And I'm using a new editor I just became an affiliate for, and it's called a Descript. Descript allows you to edit your podcast, your videos, and it does transcripts and screen recording all in one. So I'll post a link to both of those in the show notes, Buzzsprout and Descript. And if that's something you're interested in, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but you can check that out through my affiliate link, and I get a little commission in response to that, and it helps out the show. I do have a Patreon channel that I've started. Additionally, if you'd like to offer me some additional support, I do have, at a very low cost per month, the ability to help me out on Patreon. I definitely would appreciate that if that's something you feel like you want to do. Again, like I said, I just appreciate you listening. It's, of course, completely free to listen to my podcast, but if you're able to and want to help me out, I would appreciate that. You can email me at 4greenllc@gmail.com. That's my email address I have set up for now. If you have any questions, comments, want to talk about the show, or let me know your honest feedback about how the show is going so far. Or if you have any suggestions for future episodes, I'd love to hear that. But it is approaching Labor Day weekend, and I wish you and yours a very happy, healthy, and safe Labor Day weekend. I hope you get some hiking in if you can. And until next time, I'll see you out there on the trail. Thanks for listening. Bye.